Welcome to the Fully Alive podcast.
This is Andy.
And I'm Jonathan.
And this is a podcast about truly living in the midst of the grind. Hey, welcome back to the Fully Alive podcast. This is episode 4. I'm Andy.
I'm Jonathan.
And we're looking forward to talking with you guys tonight, to each other, about really living life in the midst of the grind. And tonight we have the great privilege of featuring Jonathan, and we're going to hear a little bit more about what he does and what that has to do with really living. And I wanted to entitle tonight Death and Money, and what that really has to do with living life to the full. So why don't we get rolling? So Jonathan, tell us a little bit about, you've told us before what you do, that you do. I'll let you tell us again, just for review, what you do and the type of client you tend to work with.
Sounds good. If we have a problem with ratings, we're probably having a much bigger problem with ratings starting to focus on me.
I thought people were getting tired of hearing about me, so we needed to make a switch. First 3 episodes, it was all about my cancer stuff, and what's next? Now it's about you, buddy.
Sure. So my background is I'm a lawyer. I actually started my career as a CPA, and then I went to law school, and I've focused my career predominantly in trust and estates law, which is why you'd come up with the tagline "Death and Money." So I've spent the majority of my career planning for individuals' estates, those on the very, very high end of the wealth spectrum.
Right. So isn't it true that your lowest level of estate planning is $50 million, and it goes as high as into the billion or more?
Yes, that's true. So I really have focused my entire career in the $50 million and up net worth space.
So that's a very unique part of the population.
It's very, very unique part of the population. There's certainly a lot of individuals that are in that section of the population. But my background is as a sort of a high-end tax planner. And so, obviously my skills are suited towards working with those with net worths that are very significant. So I've always done sort of estate and gift tax work. I think it's interesting, now I actually work at a public company, publicly traded company. And I work still with families at the very high end of the wealth spectrum, something we call ultra high net worth.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, you're being rather modest, because you're like, one of the top executives in that institution.
Well, it's a huge institution, so I wouldn't say top executives in the whole institution, but the within my sort of group or my team, I'm fortunate that I've been leading individuals that have high-end professional skill sets for years, and still fortunate to be able to continue to do that in service of our clients. So we have a very, very good and strong business, really focused on helping families at the very high end make decisions about not just, what they're going to do with their wealth and what it is they're going to do in terms of from a tax planning perspective, but also just really helping them think through, all of the things that happen when you have significant money, all the pluses and the minuses of having a lot of money and trying to figure out what to do with it as it goes through your kids, your grandkids, how it is that you think through these sort of complicated or tricky issues, how you think through your family and all the different dynamics that go into it. So it is very it's a very interesting line of work. And I'm obviously very fortunate to have amazing clients that I work with on a day-to-day basis that really open up and give me the privilege to really serve them.
All right.
And
So
give me
for us
opportunities.
commoners, all right. So I'm looking at this thing. I was like, okay, so you have a team and
Mhm.
you're like the director of the country, North America, something big. I know you can't divulge a lot of information. I understand, but you're like a big time director. You have a team, and your people that you're dealing with, your clients, are the rich of the rich in my limited view. 50 million to over $1 billion is a lot of money. And most people that I've been around, and I haven't been around all people, but I've been around a lot of people, if you said, oh, I have a net worth of 50 million or 500 million or $1 billion, they'd be like, holy cow, man, you got to be really happy. You could have whatever you want, do whatever you want. And, you're set. That's where I want to be. And so I guess my question is now that for whatever period of time, years, you've been dealing with these people and their families and their extreme wealth, tell us a little bit about like what that's like and what the family dynamic is like. And are these people, because you're dealing with them near the end of their life because they're estate planning, do they seem like, in general, do a lot seem very happy? Tell us a little bit about some of the observations over the years. I know this is not indicative of all clients, but what are some of the general observations you make over the years about like this thing that everyone's pursuing? These people have it. I shouldn't say everyone's pursuing, but a lot of people are pursuing. They want to be wealthy. They want to have freedom to do whatever they want, and have that kind of money. What does that tell us about how people have lived life? And, does it seem like, they're at the end of their life and they're super happy?
Yeah. So a lot of, a lot of depth in there. I would say,
well, that's not atypical for us.
Yeah. Right. I would say that, a lot of people think that having a lot of money makes everything a lot easier. And, in certain ways it makes life easier because you don't have to worry about some of the things that, you would have to worry about if you had very little money. I mean, I grew up with, two grandparents that had, immigrated to the US and had very, very little. And so, there's challenges with that, right? I mean, if you're worried about where you're going to get your next meal, right? That's a significant challenge for pretty much anybody.
I can tell you, in college, there was a period of time when my weekly food budget was $3.
Right.
And
right.
I know you went through a tough season too before you've kind of hit the big time. So, being on that end of the spectrum is pretty bad too. Can be.
It's tough, I mean, and so, what I would say is that, when you have enormous money, which is the position that most of my clients, or all of my clients, I suppose, sit in, it doesn't make it's not, life is not without its complications. I mean, it's a different set of complications that, you have to think about, but it's not without complications. I mean,
what would be an example of some of the complications?
Well, I think that, one of the other things that you brought up is, what about individuals that are on their deathbed? I mean, I sort of see both sides of the issues, right? One, the challenges with having significant money and how it impacts you and your family during your life. And then I also see, I have a lot of conversations, very in-depth conversations with individuals when they're, dying or they're about to die. Um, and you know, there's a lot of themes there. Obviously, I mean, you know, people that write these books about, you know, thinking about being on your deathbed, how would you live your life? I think that was a Stephen Covey concept. You know, they're not wrong in terms of the common things people say. Well, you know, I would imagine that people, when they're about to die, never say that they wish they had worked more. You know, that is true. I've never heard it. I've
Yeah,
never heard anybody
yeah.
say,
I
I
know I'm
wish I
not
had
going to be
worked more.
saying that. I can tell you that much.
Right. Right. Well, you couldn't have worked more. So I don't think you could say that. But
Yeah, you can go ask Suzanne. Yeah, she would
right.
probably say the same thing.
Right. Um, but you know, it is a very complicated set of circumstances. And I would say when you're trying to, yeah, if you think about it from this vantage point, you know, if you had um, enough money where you're never going to spend it, your kids are unlikely to ever spend it, your grandkids may be unlikely to ever spend it. So it's generations of individuals who will have enough money to um, basically never run out of it. Um, you
So
know,
the
you think
complication is what do you do with all this excess is one of the complications.
it's one of, but it's also more just like a mentality, right? How do you ensure that it becomes a positive force in your family rather than a negative one, right? I mean, because
Uh-huh.
you know, if you're really um, you know, if you have the ability and you have unlimited resources, you can also get yourself in quite a bit of trouble. You know, anyone, even for me, right? You know, I mean, I'm not, you know, I don't judge anybody. You know, I've been in places, you know, in my 20s and early 30s where, you know, you're for the first time ever, you're making some money, and you think that your decision making was great, but it's not always great. And you know, I you know, in terms of my clients, I'm always trying to speak with them and try to work with them on coming up with really good plans to ensure that their children and their grandchildren are really good stewards of the money. Make sure that they are really, you know, still committed to a purpose or a focus in their lives. You know, something that will allow them to be successful individuals. I kind of almost put it like this. You know, I think that um, if financial resources were not an issue for you and you could do anything in the world that you wanted to do, how is it that you make sure that those financial resources make you the best version of yourself rather than being a destructive force, right? So if you were, you know, somebody who is very passionate about um let's say helping the environment, or curing world hunger. Those are issues that you can't normally tackle if you're kind of working a 9 to 5 job for the most part, right? But if you have a
Right.
lot of resources, you can make major impacts in those spaces, or whatever it is you're passionate about. Maybe you're passionate about playing the piano, or artwork. These are all things that are difficult to achieve unless you have the resources to really apply to them. And so
So let
I
me
always
ask this because this is really interesting. So part of the need, for anyone, whether you have a little bit of resources or a lot of resources, to really live life to the full, live life in a way that is, you feel like it's really the good life. It seems like you need to have a purpose bigger than your resources so you can channel your energy and your resources into something that's more important, where a lot of times we think about when we have a lot of money, discretion, or if there are ever times in our life when we have discretionary income, a lot of times we want to use it for personal pleasure. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it sounds like when you have this great amount of resources, and I don't think it's different whether you have a great amount or a little bit, it sounds like part of the thing that helps you to really live life, you know, more enjoyably or more meaningfully, is to make sure you're investing your resources in something bigger than yourself, something more meaningful, something that may bring about good to more people. Is that kind of what you're saying about the questioning you're asking these folks when they're planning with all these resources?
Definitely. I think there's sort of two parts to it, right? I mean, I think that when you think about your family, like your family, my family, and you think about what are you about as a family? I
So
think
you
that
have three kids and their ages 8, 5, and less than a year, right?
correct.
And I have 5 kids and they're about to turn 20 up to 31. So we've got a bunch of kids between us, but they're in different seasons. So that just gives our audience, a little perspective on how we might be biased in our season of life and parenting. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that if you're thinking about any family, and you're thinking about how do you have success as a family, right? I think that most people would be well served to come up with the sort of the core values of the core tenets of what their family is about, right? And I think, for us, we have a little bit more of a discipline around um, working with families to really flush that out, right? We do a lot of work with families on maybe their family mission statement, or what are the things that they're really passionate about? What are the things that they are really focused on? And then as they bring their children into the money, into sort of the family business, if you will, it's how do the children sort of connect to that vision? So that's sort of one idea. The second idea is, individually, I think it's good for every person, every person to sort of define their purpose, right? So, your family might be about something. It might be about, a vision, a mission. But then the next question is, what are you about personally? And how does that fit within your family vision, your family mission? And I think a lot of people don't spend a lot of time on that question. And if you don't spend a lot of time on that question and you have a lot of money, it can go sideways, unfortunately, right? I mean, by and large, the families that we work with are very successful. They're obviously uber successful relative to the general population. But, unfortunately, I have been in situations where we've had, children in the family that have had really difficult drug addictions, have had suicides in the family. Those are things that are very, very, very challenging. And frankly, when I first started my career, I focused a lot more on the tax planning side of things and didn't focus so much on the family side of things. And as I've gotten sort of more, longer
Seasoned.
in the business, I realized
Yeah.
that's a pretty big miss, right? I mean, I think if you are able to sort of preserve wealth, generational wealth using planning strategies, but you're not focused on how that wealth is going to be used and how you can help families optimize how that wealth will be used as it moves down to their kids and grandkids, I think you're really not doing them a very good service. So, I think, your question is a good one. And I think that, it really comes down to defining your purpose and making sure that your financial resources align with your purpose in a way that's very productive, in a way that's very positive, so that, you don't fall into any traps and have it be a negative.
Yeah. So this is a great point because, a lot of times, I've observed and as I've talked with people and as I've struggled myself, we kind of just go through life and we just try to avoid pain and try to get what we think will make us happy. And that is our purpose. Like, I just have to get, if, whatever it is we think will make us happy. That's, psychologists talk about that a lot, that basically people are most motivated by that which they avoid pain. And then secondly, they go after what quote will make them happy. If we want to think about what, the way we're really wired, where we need some form of love, for who we are as a person and not what we produce or do. Security and significance, my life has an impact beyond myself. That's built into the wiring of our brain and our inner self. So to really, quote, live the good life, it's not just about avoiding pain and getting what we think will make us happy. It's also being able to experience, love in a way that, we're being loved for who we are and not what we produce. It's, some people call it unconditional love. It's hard for human beings to be totally unconditional because that's where we struggle, but it's possible, obviously, where we're loved for who we are, not what we produce or what we do or the money we have or whatever. And then my life matters. Like I'm making an impact where something will be around after I'm gone. So it sounds like one of the principles I'm hearing, that to live the good life, it's important to, kind of hash out your life purpose to some degree. Obviously, it will evolve. Maybe it'll change as you mature, but you have a sense of it. So my curiosity takes me to, how would you state your life purpose and how does that fit with your family? Because be able to help them with theirs, obviously you've probably hashed it out to some level with yourself and yours.
I'd hope so. I think
your sound changed a little bit.
Oh, it did?
Oh, there we go. I guess because you moved away from the microphone. Sorry.
No, all good. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, look, I think that one's purpose and the family purpose is something that's always a work in progress, right? I mean, it's not one of these things that you are able to ever perfect, and it's not something that you ever just sort of establish and forget about, right? You're always evaluating it. You're always figuring out how can I do things differently or better. The world changes, everything changes, and it's a complicated thing to establish. But I think you need to have some core principles. And I do try and talk to my own kids about, because you get a lot of things from kids like, well, this person is doing that. And you're like, well, that's interesting, but that's not what we're going to do, right? So
yeah. I think I've heard that before.
Right. And so you have to, sort of, at least for me, you should define what does it mean to be, in this case, what does it mean to be Fitzgerald, right? That's my last name. That's what my family name is. What does it mean? And, I talk to my kids about that, right? This is the standard that we have in our house. This is the standard we have for our family. This is how we talk to each other. This is how we act. This is how we show that we're responsible, by picking up our stuff. And I think that is, sort of something that I've learned is important as I've been in my profession. I think, if you think about the great companies on this planet, they have a well-defined mission, right? If you think about, pick any company that has a long-standing history of success, they have a very significant, well-defined vision. Like I've heard of, the Gore company that makes Gore-Tex. They have been in, business for a long time, history of compounded growth. Like that business, if you read about them, they know what they're doing. They define what they're doing. They have core principles. Everyone, understands what those are. And when you have a family that has tremendous resources, right, that is your business, right? Even just managing the resources, caretaking the resources, that's a business in and of itself. So you need to you need to put the same level of thought and discipline into that. And for me, look, I don't have enormous resources. I'm very fortunate to have what I have, but I don't have enormous resources. But with the resources that I do have, and for anybody that has any resources, thinking about, what is it that we want to do with them? How does that impact what our family's about, what our family mission is? These are things that to me separate success in many cases from failure, because if you leave it to chance, then most of the time you're going to have a wide range of outcomes,
Well,
not all
yeah,
of which are going to
inertia
be
pulls
positive.
you. Yeah,
You know?
inertia really pulls you. I always say, if you just go with the flow, you end up going down the toilet.
Right. Right. And,
Yeah.
and look, I mean, it's like I've made,
Loads of mistakes in my life. I'm a work in progress myself. So for me in my profession, it's a partnership between, those that I serve and those that are being served by me and my team. And um, we're always trying to learn and grow. But if we don't start with a starting point, if we don't start with, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish, this is what we're about, and this is what we're moving towards, then then you don't have a process at all, right? You're just guessing. And
Right.
I would encourage anybody to really think about that.
Yeah, that's a definite classic, Stephen Coveyism, begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
When you're going in a direction, you need to have the end picture kind of in your brain of what you like. Like, for example, like I know for you, I've heard you say, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you feel like one of your purposes is to give great advice. Another purpose is for you to, love people well, love your wife well, love your kids well. And then I know one of your core principles is to really, um, parent your kids well, like be a good dad to your girls, to your son. And, those things really drive you. They drive your decision making. They just drive how you spend money, how you spend time, your resources. So you have that kind of clearly defined as higher things in your life, than say other things. I know you're a really good golfer and you love to play golf, but, golf falls a little bit under, some of those other things we just mentioned. Would you say that that's accurate? And that's kind of part of the process we go through, is just saying, hey, I'm going to take a stand on some of these things. This is what's important to me, even though I love playing golf and I love getting out there with the boys and, competing and stuff. But, I'm going to be committed to, these other principles that are bigger than just what I want. Is that accurate, or can you fill in anything on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I played golf today, and I can assure you I'm not a very good golfer. At least I wasn't today.
I don't know. You've also had some really good days, man.
Well,
anytime you can get in the 70s, dude.
yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking, you're like, oh, you're doing, and I'm like, 0 for 1, 0 for 2. No, I think,
You're
think,
just modest.
no, I think that, you know, you're right from the perspective of I may not always be accomplishing what I'm trying to do well, but I'm
Right.
always trying to define what I'm trying to do well, right? I mean, I'm always trying to think about the things you just said. Okay. In my business, I'm always trying to figure out how to give people better advice, how to give truly great world-class advice. I spent most of my professional life studying and thinking and constantly trying to refine and get better at that. And so that's a core principle of what I'm trying to do from a business perspective.
Right.
In my house, I am always trying to figure out how do I prioritize my wife and my kids, above, everything else, even sometimes at the expense of friendships or other things, right? Because you only have so much time in the day. So if I have to choose between A and B, I need to know, am I prioritizing A or am I prioritizing B if I can only choose one? And unfortunately, part of life, at least to me, is knowing what to say no to. I don't even like the word no, but knowing what to prioritize. And so,
Right. Or at least what to say no to today, or not yet.
Right, exactly. And so I'm always trying to make sure I have a clear hierarchy in my mind of those things that are the most important things that I'm going to invest my time in and for me, my time is my biggest resource because I don't have, enormous money, but whatever resources you have, I'm doing, I'm great. I'm not complaining, but, I'm saying like, I don't have the types of resources that my clients do, but whatever it is that you have in terms of resource, whether it's your time or whether it's your money, um, you know, giving some real thought into what you're prioritizing is obviously the first step. And, for me, um, I've always thought about, some of the things that my clients have shared with me about mistakes they feel like they've made. And I've had many clients tell me, Jonathan, look, I obviously achieved the highest, uh, you know, level of business success in my geographic area or, in the country. But, I didn't go to the softball games. I didn't go to the soccer games. I missed those things and I really regret it. And you should not miss those things. You shouldn't be on the phone with me at, 10, 11 o'clock at night when, you gotta, when you could be, doing something else with your kids. And my disposition is to be a workaholic. So I have to fight against that. But, it's worth considering, when you're making decisions and you're saying, okay, am I going to do this with my time or that, or am I going to do this with my money or that? How do those things align with your core principles of what you're trying to accomplish in your life? Because if you don't think about that question prior to making the decision, then, you're not optimizing it. And when you have a lot of zeros behind that decision, if you're not thinking about it, then you can, then that's not the best. That's not the best answer.
Right. So I think what I've heard you say too is that even though a lot of your clients, a lot of people you've talked with, maybe that aren't even clients, because I know you're in the country club playing golf with a lot of wealthy people, but you hear your clients are uber wealthy people and are at the pinnacle of financial and professional success. And yet you hear them expressing at the end of their life regret that they missed out on a lot of things on their family. Is that pretty common from what you've observed?
I would say that's one of the most common themes. Yeah. I mean, I think, and I'm reporting the information, right? So I don't judge anybody for anything that they do in their lives, but, I've never, most people, they have regrets around, a divorce, that had a negative impact in their family. Their big regrets normally come back to things that happened within their family. I
Right.
don't hear a lot of regrets about, something didn't go right in my business and I really regret that. Maybe sometimes around employees, maybe they feel like, okay, maybe I could have done things different with an employee or employees, but it's people, right? And I think that's when you think about, what, at least for me, what we're all trying to do as people and, what sort of unifies us, it's, we're all trying to make sure that, or at least I think we have a base need to really trying to make sure that those people around us are successful. And I think when something happens within your family and your own children are not successful or they are having major issues, right? That is especially painful. Right. And so,
Right.
it's, you would hope that everybody that you encounter, you're helping make their lives better in some way. But when your children wind up having major struggles, and you can have all the money in the world and you can't fix it, that's a very, very painful place to be in for anybody. And so, I think that that's the majority of the things that I hear, the most regrets. And I've been on the other end of the phone when someone's told me that one of their children has committed suicide. And it's hard. It's just, there's no words to describe. I mean, it's absolutely heart wrenching. And, a lot of people say,
Yeah.
I'll never recover from this moment. And I think most don't. Obviously, some people find ways to get through it. But, those types of events, they are very, very challenging. So, I spend my time constantly thinking about how do I take the knowledge that I've been so blessed with by so many amazing clients over the years and so many amazing people just generally I've encountered over the years who have been honest with me and sort of vulnerable with me to tell me about the things they feel like they failed at. How do I use that to help make sure that others don't make the same mistakes? And, that's something that really drives me. That's something that really motivates me, every day in my profession and in my personal life.
Yeah, well, I see that because I know your clients have told you this, and I've observed it. Is you really do care about people as people. Like you're not just looking at them as dollars, or clients. You care about them as people. And so when you get the news that one of your clients' child has, been put in an institution for addiction or has committed suicide, I would imagine it's heartbreaking. I mean, I once had a friend whose son committed suicide, and I had no idea that there were issues. And, I don't cry easily, but I just involuntarily burst into tears because I couldn't imagine what it would be like, for someone to walk through that. And it's brutal. I remember my dad, we took care of my dad at the end of his life. And my dad, great guy in many ways, but, was poor as anything. And, he was the same thing. He was like, when he talked about what he regretted, being divorced from my mom and, things like that. It wasn't about, how he didn't, make more money or anything like that. I mean, so, these are deeply personal issues, and we're not trying to, generalize and pigeonhole, but it seems to me from listening to you and observing, when you're dealing with these professionally and financially highly successful people, that the bigger drive in our lives is for meaningful quality relationships, even more than the success, and that they're even trying to use their resources. They're trying to figure out, who gets what and will they align with the purpose, because they care about the people involved, not because they care as much about the money, even though I would imagine once you've given your whole life to making that much money, it's hard to see it not keep producing. So I'm sure there's some, drive there for continued financial success out of the family, but it's more important about the family relationships. Do you see in a lot of these situations that the family bonds tend to be strong, or does it vary, or what are you observing there?
That's hard because it's kind of a relative question, right? I mean, I think, family bonds are always challenging, right? No matter who you are and what family you're in, right? So,
sure.
It's not like, I think that it really, I don't know that that's a socioeconomic, sort of factor, right? I think everybody, and look, over the years, I've become trained in having conversations with people around money and having conversations with, people's children around money and making sure that families communicate better around money, right? And communicate better, overall, right? So that is something that I have worked at for a lot of years. But
and what's a key principle in communicating as a family that you've observed that makes it positive and healthy?
I think that for the most part, for me, it's around sort of two issues. I mean, one, you have to be open. That sounds obvious, but it's not as obvious as you would think. And two, the timing has to be right. Right. So like for me, I don't have I sort of err on the side of like, I don't have full open communication with people's children around this, the nature and extent of the substantial wealth when they're very young, right? We sort of delay those conversations until they're, older, and older depends on, the parents feeling about when that's old enough, right? It could be in the 20s, could be in the 30s, before you start having really in-depth conversations. But, you know, the fact of the matter is, once you make the decision to have, openness, you need to have openness, and you need to have honesty, and you need to get through some things that are really uncomfortable, right? You need to be willing to go deep and to be uncomfortable in conversations. And a lot of people, that's not their strength, right? It wasn't my strength when I started doing what I was doing. I wasn't used to having conversations that were super uncomfortable. Now I have conversations every day that people would say, gosh, that must be very uncomfortable. And I hear from my clients sometimes, like, this is an uncomfortable conversation for me. I hear that a lot, actually. But, you do have to push through that, right? Because I think sometimes what it brings up when you're having a difficult conversation with your family, it brings up feelings of like, oh my gosh, I think that I failed in this particular arena. And what I'm always trying to help people understand is, like, we've all failed in all arenas, right? Like, nobody
Right.
has gotten it right. Like, I'm a professional, but if you came into my house and you saw some days, like I've got plenty of bad days, right? But the bottom line is that, we all have an opportunity to take where we are today and to get better. And you can't look back. You have to always look forward, and you have to be thinking, okay, I have an opportunity today, tomorrow, in a year or 2 years, to improve, to make this better, and that's something that to me is the biggest squandered opportunity. It's not so much what happened in the past. It's more holding on to the past and saying, because of the way things were, I'm unwilling to get in there and figure out why it is that things are not right. That's compounding a mistake, right? The mistake originally made is the mistake or whatever. But now let's figure out how it is that we fix it, move forward, and really use it as a learning experience. And that's challenging for anybody, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's very hard for anybody to sort of get into a space where they're talking about something that's very uncomfortable, and they're sort of laying that issue bare on the table. And then they're saying, okay, how do we think strategically about how we do better? That's very tough. And,
Yeah.
I've kind of learned, because I started in this profession when I was very young, and I sort of made a lot of mistakes pushing people, and, not being as gracious as I need to be, and not respecting people's boundaries and timelines at times. And I've gotten better at that. Right. And, you just sort of learn that, you can help, people process things and get to the conclusion, and encourage and provide good guidance and advice, so that they feel like they're safe and moving forward. And, that's been a big, takeaway learning experience for me.
Yeah. Well, Jonathan, this is really outstanding stuff, and we could talk for much longer, and we'll definitely approach some of these topics again. But the purpose of our podcast, besides just two dudes talking about life and experiences and stuff like that, in the sense, is to help each other and whoever's listening to enjoy life more, to enjoy their relationships more, to have more hope and positivity about where they are now and in the future. Not a false positivity, but a genuine one. And so, we've been looking at different things, again, whether it was my cancer journey or ultra endurance events, or, you're dealing with the uber wealthy at the end of their lives. Some of the principles in summary and in review that I heard tonight, and this will be my last question, and then we'll call it a night, is I heard, it's important to have a vision and kind of a purpose or mission about where I'm going with my life. And from that, generating your priorities of what you're going to really put above something else, A or B, what's going to come first, because you don't have unlimited time, no matter how wealthy you are. And then to obviously bring family and loved ones to align with that as much as you can. Make sure there's a safe enough environment for open and honest communication. And let me see if I did I forget anything major at this point? How would you summarize what we've talked about tonight? You know, would you affirm what I've said and add anything or take anything away?
Yeah, I think that everything you said is right. I mean, the only thing I might add is, you know, it's a process, right? I mean, you know, it's never perfect. You're never, you know, it's important to define where you're going. You may never get there, but you know, the process of defining what you're moving towards and then figuring out how you're taking active steps to move towards that, you know, to me is a very important principle in terms of what it is that I try and advise individuals and families on. And I think, you know, there's a lot of pressure. I think about this even, you know, from my own kids, and the pressure's increased, right, when you have an uber successful parent. But there's a lot of pressure for young people, you know, today, a lot of things that we don't deal with, that we never dealt with, right? Whether it's, you know, all of the issues around social media, whether it's, you know, the fact that, you know, by and large, this is a, you know, a very wealthy generation of individuals. It's the wealthiest generation by sort of dollars, you know, passing between family units ever.
Right.
And, you know, there's a lot of pressure, you know, sort of to perform in that. And when you think about your own significance or your legacy, I think that it's, you know, it's really of benefit to continue to focus or hone in on what's the most important thing, so that you're replacing or you have an alternative to all those things that are not so great in my mind. Right. I mean, I think
Right.
social
I always
media,
like to say good is the enemy of best.
right.
You know, for
Right.
sure.
And you know, if you, you know, there's all sorts of things in life that you can't control. You know, like you said, you don't control the day you die. And, but what you can control every day is what you're focused on, and you can control every day what you're modeling in terms of your behavior. And, you know, those two things go a really long way, you know, to combat a lot of the things that are problematic or challenging in life, society, period. So, you know, I'll tell you, I think about this all the time. I think about it for myself, my kids, my clients. And if you are focused, you at least give yourself the best possible chance of success. And, you know, for me, success is not entirely monetary. Monetary is a portion, there's no doubt. But, you know, success is much, much bigger and deeper than that. And, you know, look, if you know where you're going, you certainly give yourself a much better chance of that. So, anyway, that was probably long-winded, but, you know, it was interesting to be the person interviewed tonight rather than the interviewer. It's
my pain.
it's a challenging seat to sit in, as I'm realizing.
I think you had a lot of good things to say. I forgot one of the things I really appreciated was the fact that we need to use our energy instead of just lamenting or arguing or fighting, you know, about the past or the present. But, you know, what can we do today to make things better? You know, make our relationship better, you know, make our situation better, and just take it one day at a time. I think that's a great, you know, one of the great focuses you can have. But I thought you shared a lot of great things, and we thank our audience for hanging in there with us in this episode as two very flawed dudes try to figure out how we can, be better for our families, be better in our jobs, be better for the community, and live with a purpose that's bigger than us and that we're proud of. So I thank you for the things you talked about, Jonathan. And I kind of like this being the interviewer thing instead of the interviewee. I think I might do that again sometime here soon.
Great. No, and look, I think it would be interesting. One of our goals, I think, at the beginning was to have a podcast that would not necessarily give answers, but sort of elicit conversation. And so, we continue to ask people that, if they have thoughts or ideas or questions, we're very open to that, and so anyway, thanks for listening. Thank you, Andy,
please catch us on
always.
iTunes or Spotify or YouTube, and leave a review or like it or give it a rating or something, because we're getting lonely a little bit. And we're going to move into some more specific topics in future episodes and bring some guests in. But these first 4 episodes was just a little bit of an introduction about Jonathan and I and how we view life and, moving forward from there. So we really thank you guys for coming along on the journey. And thank you, Jonathan, for sharing some of your expertise and experience tonight.
Perfect. All the best, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye now. We'll see you on the next one.